Today, I like to speak on the authorities that are about, and there's certain things that, of course, we have to live in a particular manner cause us to be responsible to what has been set in order. Now, we're not ignorant to that. When we look into the words of Yahweh, we're not ignorant to the authorities that are there, because Yahweh tells us, he said, you don't wrestle against flesh and blood only, but principalities and powers are set in high places. So he's letting you know that there's something other than what you're dealing with here. In the scriptures, it shows you time and time again that Yahweh dealt with the affairs of man, or actually interfered into mankind's activities. And we see that a lot of times. And so it comes to a point that now to have what we call that blessing, there are things that we have to do certain things ourselves. We're in this earth right now, and we are in this earth because we are in a fallen state, or in a state that we could easily be taken advantage of. The reason why we could be taken advantage of is because we don't really know the level by which the principalities and powers play their game, or by which they imprison us. And their imprisonment of mankind comes down to what mankind does, because mankind has to allow them to do what they are going to be doing to us. So nowhere along the line are they going to come and just take you over unless you open the way. And when you open the way, or I open the way, I have to give them things to sustain them. I'm not sure if you ever heard, resist the devil and the devil will flee. That's what Yahshua told us. And that's what we have to do. Because Yahshua himself, that's what Yahshua showed us to say. When Yahshua was being tempted, this is exactly what he did. He resisted that nature that was in him. And by resisting that nature, actually what he was doing, he was making a sacrifice. The sacrifice that we're making is what we do. That's why we have to become living sacrifices. And that's why when we come to understand what's going on, it makes no sense to take an animal anymore. Now, for the individual who still believes it's an animal that you have to take, well, he has to take an animal because that's what he believes, that's all he knows. But for the individual who has been liberated and knows he's been enlightened in a particular manner, that individual knows that his best is not something else. His best is him. That's what he could do. Now, let's go over to my first scripture here, and my first scripture is in Romans. In Romans chapter 6, it shows us there's something that we have to do. The power is not totally outside of our hands. But yes, there are things that's going on that will actually cause it to be hard at times to do what we know we should be doing. So in Romans 6 here, and let's look in verse 16, it says, do you not know that to whom you yield yourselves as servants to obey, his servant you are whom you obey, whether to sin is actually the transgression of the law, or of obedience, which leads to righteousness. So to whoever we yield ourselves as servants to obey, his servants we are, and we obey. Now let's look at this now a little closer. So it says, do you not know that to whom? But it doesn't have to just be a person, but this could be anything. It could be a spirit. This could be a spirit that we're yielding ourselves to. This could be a passion that we're yielding ourselves to. And it could be a desire that we're yielding ourselves to. Whatever it is, which comes down to a spirit. A spirit and shows itself to us as a passion or a desire, a craving that you have, something that you have to get fixed. And so when we yield ourselves to those lower things, we become a servant to that thing. You know what a servant is? A servant is actually what follows the instruction of something else. If I'm your servant, well, when you instruct me, I do that thing. Now, well, we have spirits inside of us also. The human has a spirit, but you have other lower spirits. And these other lower spirits deal with you in this lower form also. And when they deal with us in this lower form and we obey them, we become servants and they lock us in by our own habits and our passions and desires. Whether it's a drug that you're taking and you become dependent upon that drug, it's the same thing. These guys have your desires locked in to the activities that they want you to do, feeding off our desires, our passions, our emotions. That's what they do. So they can't do it themselves because they don't have the body to feel all those things. But they want to experience that, so they get other people to do that so they could feed off of that stuff. That's how, because they're spirits. Now, how do they feed off of that? Well, when they take you and they have you do that thing, they're actually not necessarily feeling it, but they're actually experiencing that very thing that they have you doing. But you don't know what's going on. You think it's just me and I'm having fun. But you don't know that something has actually got us doing that. So here goes now. It says, do you not know that to whom, spirit, whatever, you yield yourself as servant to obey? So you're going to obey something now. His servants or her servants, whatever, you are whom you obey. Whether to sin, you see that? Whether to sin. So we have to figure out now what sin is. So you obey one of two things. Sin, or we're going to obey something that's not sin. Now in 1 John 3:4 here, let's look at that. In 1 John 3:4, we see, it says, whoever commits sin transgresses also the law. Why? Because sin is the transgression of the law. So these guys actually get a hold of us when we do what? When we don't walk in the way that Yahweh has set for us to walk. Now Yahweh has a kingdom, and based upon his kingdom, he tells us to walk in the same manner. What does he say? He says, make sure you do what I say to do. Now let's go over to Deuteronomy real quick here. In Deuteronomy 28, okay, let's look at verse 1. He says here in verse 28, verse 1, he says, and it will be, if you will listen diligently to the voice of Yahweh, your Father, by observing and doing all his laws. Well, what's that saying? If sin is a transgression of the law, he's telling you also, if you listen and do not sin. Because sin is a transgression of the law, he's telling you here, by observing and doing all his law, which I command you this day, that Yahweh your Father will set you high above all the nations of the earth. He's going to do that. Now, if we come down to verse 15, we just got done establishing what sin is by this book. It says, however, if you do not obey Yahweh your Father, and do not carefully. So he's telling us now, we can't just go about being careless, we have to be careful. Okay? And do not carefully follow his laws and his statutes, which I command you this day, then all these curses will come upon you and accompany you. Now, Moshe goes on to writing the stuff that is there. He's talking about different things, and if you go down and you start reading all that he's talking about, we could actually see these things in our world. Now, he comes over here now, and he says in verse 21, he says, Yahweh will make the plagues cling to you. Plagues are all kinds of diseases, all kinds of emotional issues people have. It's a lot of things. If you go down a little further, he says, Yahweh will cause you to be defeated before your enemies. You will go out in one direction against them and flee. Now, if you come down a little further, in verse 27, it says, Yahweh will afflict you with the diseases of Egypt, with tumors and festering sores, itch, from which you cannot be healed. Look at verse 28. Yahweh will afflict you with madness, blindness, and confusion of mind. Now, this is actually going on right now, guys. If you don't think these guys who are out there attacking cops and all kind of stuff, don't you think that they got their minds all together? These things are happening right now. Blindness, if you look at it, it's not just talking about what you cannot see physically anymore. No, it's you don't have the ability anymore to process the way of Yahweh. That's what blindness is. So we grope in the dark. In verse 29, it says right here, and you shall grope at noonday. Noonday. That means while it's still light out, or while the light is still there, you're going to be groping, stumbling, because we're blind. It says, just as a blind man gropes in darkness, but we're doing it in daylight because we cannot see. Well, we cannot see because we're transgressing the laws of Yahweh. That's what it comes down to. Now, let's go over to Ephesians 6 now, because Yahweh just got on showing us, if you listen, this is what he set up in heavens. If you listen, well, he tells us whatever we do in heaven, we have to make sure that we set this up in the earth. Because if we don't set up in the earth, then we're not teaching the people to follow the laws of Yahweh. We're not teaching our children to do that thing. So you have voices that's coming to you today too. And you have voices that will always come to you as long as you are not one with your Father. As long as you're on the path coming back to your Father and you're not one with your Father, you're going to have voices that's going to be talking to you. Because that's how you overcome. You can't overcome unless you have something that is going to be resisting you. Something that you have to display strength upon for you to get past that point. If you're working out, when you first start working out, you probably could do 10 push-ups. Some of us have. As we continue to work out, then we start doing 15, 20. Okay? It's overcoming because there's a point that you were at that if you didn't apply resistance to yourself and handle that resistance, you wouldn't get to that 1 or that 15. I was at a point in my life that I was doing hundreds of push-ups. And I could go and do in one set like 150 push-ups. Today, I may be at 1. But I didn't start out doing 150. I started out doing 1. You know, they say you go up and you come back down. Well, with that resistance, I allowed my body dealt with me that it had so much oxygen in my muscles that I could continue going. Well, after you don't do something for a little while, then your body's like, well, it's not doing that because you're not servicing it after a while. But it's in the same manner in the spiritual way. You have to exercise strength against your weaknesses. And when you exercise strength against your weaknesses, the only thing that happens is you get stronger. If we don't exercise and allow our strength to go against our weaknesses, then we start losing strength. It's very easy to not work out. Just ask me. It's very easy. And it takes determination. It takes strength. Especially when you're used to not doing it. In the same manner, when we're used to allowing our lives to go to certain lower things, it takes strength to actually get to the point that we do not transgress the laws of Yahweh. It takes strength. Now, here we go. So Yahweh has got on telling us, listen. He says, listen, and all these things are going to go well with you. Then he says later, if you don't listen, then all these things are not going to go well with you, because you're going to have this issue, that issue. And he goes on and shows you all the things that's going to happen. Well, it happens to the individual. It happens, then it's going to happen to the family, happens to the neighborhood, happens to the nation, happens to the earth. It just snowballs. That's all really happens. Now let's look at Ephesians 6. Ephesians 6 and verse 1. It says children. And children is not just your child. Or it's not just a child. Let's look at what a child really comes down to be. A child is someone who can't really take care of themselves yet, but you leave them up to it, they think they can. And they go around walking around and doing things like they own things. So a child needs direction. A child needs to be taken care of. But then you think of that in a physical sense, and you see yourself grow up, and we think, well, we're no longer children. And so when the scripture speaks to us, it seems like it's not talking to us anymore. Children, obey your parents, this 6:1 says. But we have children who are spiritual children, who are children in the mind, children in our activities, children in our passions, children in our desires. Because we haven't gotten to the point that we could handle ourselves with the spiritual things that are about us. So we're also children. We have no strength. We need to be taken care of, but we don't think we do. So just as Yahweh says, listen to me, and if you don't listen to me, these things are going to happen. He tells you here, and I here, we all have parents, even if they're gone. We still have parents in one sense or another. So it says children, students, those who need help, obey your parents. Parents are teachers. They're guardians. Children, obey your parents in Yahweh. Well, what does Yahweh give us? To do it in Yahweh, it has to be the law. In Yahweh, in the law. Notice what it goes on to say, for this is right. In other words, this is what is righteous. Because your Father in heaven goes and he shows them his law. And in his law, he says, if you do these things, then it's going to go well for you. But if you don't do these laws, then all these problems are going to be in your life until it consumes you. Now, problems could be in your life, but will it consume you? Because there's always going to be problems in the earth, but will it consume us? And that's what Yahweh says. It's going to consume us. All these things will cling to you until you are consumed. Now we got to think that we're not dealing with flesh and blood alone. We're dealing with passions and desires that's lurking in our members. These are spirits, guys. These are spirits that feed us. And as we get used to doing what they are commanding, because we become servants to them, then their consciousness is in every cell. Because we allow that. And they have taken over the whole city. There is no justice in the city because we haven't allowed the light of Yahweh to come in. That's what happens. So Yahweh is showing us here what we should do. Now in verse 2 it says, honor your father and your mother. Now notice what it says in verse 1. It says, children, obey your parents in Yahweh. So it has to be according to the law. It's not just telling you to just obey your parents. If your parents is telling you to go murder that person over there, notice it says, children, obey your parents in the law. So it's not just telling you to arbitrarily do what they say. Obey them according to what Yahweh says. If it's going to bring harm, and you could see that it's going to bring harm to someone, and you don't really understand what's going on here, and you see, look, this is it, but Yahweh says, okay, obey your parents. Well, he also told the Levites that they should do what the priest says as far as managing and building the temple. But if they were going to break down the temple, that instruction wasn't given to them. They should be supervisors over the Levites in the building and the maintenance and all those things of the temple. But if once they said, listen here, let's tear this son of a gun down because we don't want to do this anymore, the Levites, they weren't commanded for that. They were commanded to do something else. Well, your parents are the priests. They're like high priests. And the children are like the Levites. They serve the high priest. But they had to do it in a particular manner. They had to do it in Yahweh. So it says, honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise. It has a promise. And the promise is, you should honor your father and mother, that your days will be long upon the land that you go to possess. Well, folks may think, well, the land that you're going to be possessing is this thing right here. Well, your land is what you're going to be influenced by. If you live in Canaan, you're going to do what the Canaanites do. If you live in Japan and you were born there, you probably won't be speaking English. This is what the land is. It's what influences you. Now, if the laws of Yahweh influence you, then this is where your life is going to be long in the things that Yahweh said to do. And this is righteousness, and Yahweh is going to receive us. But if we don't do what our parents say, then we're not going to do what Yahweh says. Because our parents are the ones who are in the law. Now, not every parent even follows the law. Today, you go around, guys, and I mean, the overwhelming majority of parents don't even know what Yahweh says anymore. So Yahweh's not telling you to follow just any parent. He's telling you to do this. This is not me. This is your scriptures. Children, obey your parents in Yahweh, in the law. It says, honor your mother and your father. How? In the law. Which is the first commandment with a promise. So Yahweh is giving you a promise if you're going to follow your parents in the law. Just as he gave you a promise in Deuteronomy here that tells you if you do this, you got all these things coming to you. That's a promise too. And if you don't do this, that's a promise also, that these things are going to be taking place. In verse 3, that it may be well with you, and you may live long on the earth. Now, we listen to that, we think, oh man, that's my life right here. Shoot, I could have this physical life long. Sorry. We got to think like Yahweh thinks and like Yahweh's intending. I don't know if you guys ever read in the scriptures, like Yahweh says certain things. If you do so and so, if you don't do this, he's going to cut off your name from under heaven. Well, if you're going to die, what's the big deal anyway? If you're going to die, there's going to be no more. My name is cut off from under heaven. Well, okay, well, I'm gone. Who cares? But obviously, it's a promise that's going to have an effect after you're not here. Because he's not just talking about the life that you're going to live here, because your life here may not even be long. Here's another life that you have, but if you don't follow the laws of Yahweh, or we don't do those things that Yahweh says, then our eyes do not open to these things, and we grope in the dark, not seeing this whole life that he's talking about. But if we reverence Yahweh and we carefully do what he says to do, our minds are going to be upon that, and he's going to open our minds. But if our mind is on crookedness, guess what we're going to do? We're going to always figure out how to be crooked. Because that's what we do. We're going to always try to find a way to deceive that one, and to deceive that one, and to rob that one, and to rob this one, and to get the Brinks truck, and to make and get all this money laid on my pillow. But we don't think of the consequences. Now, let's go over to Romans here. Let's go to Romans 12. Romans 12. So we all have these weaknesses, guys, that are upon us. We yield ourselves to certain things. You know, you go back to our ancestors, Adam and Eve. They yielded themselves to something other than Yahweh. Think about it. It's something that is common to man. It's not something that is only plaguing you. You're the only one that's there. No, there are billions of people who are plagued with the things that is common to man. How do we break the cycle, however? Because we have seen the destruction that is upon the earth today. And there is more that is coming. New Zealand had 30 earthquakes over 3 days, over 5.0. The Solomon Islands had 27 in 2 days. That's over 5.0. That's not even counting what's under 5.0, because I didn't even go and check those out. It'll be too enormous. There are things that are happening in the earth. We were warned about that. We were warned about that. Hold your place right there in Romans. And let's go to Matthew. Hold your place right there, Matthew 24. Matthew 24. And let's look at in verse 3. 24 and verse 3. It says, "Now as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, 'Tell us, when will these things be? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?'" And as you go in here, in verse 7, he says, "For nation will rise against nations." We see that going on right now all over the place. Kingdoms against kingdoms, we see that too. "And there will be famine, pestilence, diseases, all kind, new ones, Zika, Ebola that's broken out all over the place. Even though you had Ebola before, you didn't have it going by the air." That's what it says next. "And earthquakes in place after place." It's telling you that we're in a particular age, guys. So in this thing now, there's things that we have to do. Now that we know what's plaguing us, there's something that we have to do. We just can't live the way that our passions and desires are directing us in. So here goes in Romans 12. Shaul says to these guys, he says, "Therefore I appeal to you, brothers or brethren, by the mercies of Yahweh, that you present or offer your bodies to Yahweh as living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to Yahweh." What's holy and acceptable? Well, we go back when Yahweh says the things of the law. That's what's holy and acceptable. So you give yourself as a living sacrifice. This says, notice what it says next, guys. It says, which is only. You're not even going over and above here. Which is your reasonable sacrifice or your reasonable service. It's not even going over and beyond. It's only what's reasonable. To put ourselves down and humble ourselves unto the mighty hand of Yahweh. We have a lot of things that's about us. We got to think about that. In verse 2. So if we don't know what's going on now, here goes verse 2. It tells us, "And do not be conformed to the pattern of the world." Because this is a major problem. And if you have friends that's out in the world, your friends are probably going to be directing you to be conformed to the pattern of the world. But be transformed. And guys, it's not only, this transformation is not just you trying to change your mind. This is something that is going in your genes. This is a genetic transformation. It doesn't happen over one night or one day. It's something that you have to feed yourself over and over. It has to slowly become your desire. And as it becomes your desire, then the darkness starts to be pushed out, because what you're doing, you're putting in this light, and this light that you're putting in is living. It has life. It has life. Just like the darkness has life. But it's death. The darkness lives in you too. But this other thing that you're putting in is light. And when it goes in, it disrupts the darkness that's in there. Now you can push the light back out. All you need to do to push the light back out is to hold on to the darkness. And the light slowly goes back out. But there's a beating that's coming. There's a spanking. But if you hold on to the light, the darkness is going to be removed. You come into this room and turn on the light and see what happens to the darkness that's in there tonight at midnight. If this thing is not here, the creatures far and wide across the street, they're going to see right in here too, because there's so much light going on in here. They're just trying to show you what's going to be happening in you in the same manner. You turn on the light in your house, which is your body, you're going to have something move. If it's dark, it's going to leave. But in order for darkness not to take over that room, you have to keep the light on. You have to keep the light on. Because when the light goes, guess what comes back? If it's nighttime, guys, and if nighttime is just talking about a particular time in mankind's history, when there is darkness in man's minds. If we don't keep the light on, darkness is all around us. So what's going to happen? Darkness comes in. So do not be conformed, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, by the changing of your mind, the changing of the human spirit that can happen, the changing of your passions and desires, cutting those guys off that are broadcasting into your mind and telling us to hate our brother and to hate our sister, and follow the guy that's saying love your brother and your sister as yourself. Because that's the one that is right, Yahweh says. You do these things and follow your parents in Yahweh, because this is right. Well, what's your parents telling you to do? To hate your brother? Well, if your parents is telling you to hate your brother, then you know that's not the parent in Yahweh. But if your parents are telling you, listen here, grab the light and love your brother, this is in Yahweh, because that's what the command is, to follow these things in the law. We go on here. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Why? Now, here goes now. That you may be able to test and prove what is righteous. You can't prove what is righteous unless righteousness is in there. If other than that, we're going to grope in the dark. Righteousness is light, guys. And to test something, you have to have the light to examine it. If we don't have the light to examine it, we go right back to Deuteronomy. We're going to grope in the dark at noonday. We can't see. We think we see. We think we're grown up, but we cannot see. So we'll be able to test what is righteous and acceptable. Now, if something is in our minds and it's telling us something that's outside of the laws of Yahweh, we already know that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable, neither is it the perfect will of Yahweh. This is what it's telling you, be renewed in your mind, that you may be able to test and prove what is righteous and acceptable and perfect will of Yahweh. We can't do it without taking the law of Yahweh in. It's not going to happen. Okay, let's go ahead and go over the Hebrews. You look at what we just got done reading. It says, present yourselves. No one can do it for you. Present yourselves. Let's go over to Hebrews 13. As living sacrifices. Well, we were talking when Yahshua had his bout in the wilderness. What he was actually doing was making that sacrifice. He was following the instructions of his Father. So the law would come in his mind. It says, do this. And he would say, it is written. And something else would come along and he would say, it is written. Well, he was talking about the law. What's written? The law is written. Okay. So here goes Hebrews. This is how you make that sacrifice, guys. Hebrews 13, and let's look at verse 17. This is how you make the sacrifice, or part of what we do to make the sacrifice. It says, obey those who have the rule over you. Well, if we obey Yahweh, we already saw what Yahweh said. He said that it's going to go well for us. If we don't obey Yahweh, it's not going to go well for us. Well, you think as parents, you have children, what happens when you instruct your children in a particular way, and they don't do those things? How well does it go for them? Whether you spank their butts, or whether you simply put them under some other kind of punishment that they have to deal with. So obey those who have the rule for you, and submit yourselves, for they watch out for your souls. Guys, they could only watch out for your souls if they're doing it in Yahweh. Your parents could only look out for your souls if they're doing it in Yahweh. If not, they're going to grope in the dark. They're going to mess up. Because they're not looking at the things that brings light, so they could examine and give you the right direction. Somewhere along the line, they are going to make that lethal mistake. So obey those who have the rule over you, and submit yourselves. What are they telling you guys? Humble yourselves. Now, this is not going to work any other way. Because it's not up to the parents to get you to do a particular thing. No, it's up to you, the children. The parents can control what you do. Once it's in your will to do a particular thing, that thing lives in you and it's just waiting for the opportunity to exercise itself. So the parents subject you to do this and subject you to do that. But in your spirit and in your person, you want to do something else. Well, how long could the parents get you to do that? Because it's not your will, so you're unchained still. So as soon as we get an opportunity to exercise that, whatever is in there, we do it because that's the will. But it's not the perfect will of Yahweh, it's our own will. And when we go off and we do these things, this is what we just saw in Deuteronomy, because this is what takes over. So looking in here now, 17, notice what happens. This is the responsibility of a parent. He says, as they who must give account, they have to give account for your souls. Do your part, that they may do so with joy and not with grief. Why? Because it's unprofitable for you. So how do we do it? Listen, guys, submit yourselves. This is a sacrifice that we're doing. Obey those who have the rule over you and submit yourselves to them. Well, no, not with today's society, guys, because there's something that's living in me that's telling me to buck up against them. And the spirit that's there have to have me resist them. Well, this proves to be unprofitable for me when I'm doing that. And it sure don't help my parents when I do it. And I'm just looking out for this curse that Yahweh talked about to come upon me. That's all I'm doing. Now, whether we are far gone in this or whether we're just starting up in this, it's there. It's going to happen every time. Not because I said it. No, because that's what the heavens declare. And if the heavens declare it, we're not going to escape it. It's going to happen. Now, let's go on over to Galatians. Galatians 4. Galatians 4. Now, all this has to be done in Yahweh. All in Yahweh. Because whatever is in Yahweh has to be done in the earth. Now, in Galatians 4, let's look at verse 1. But I say this. As long as the heir, or the one who is going to inherit the promise, is an infant. An infant, unlearned. Student, same thing. We're talking about that earlier. An unlearned student can't take care of himself. He is no different than a slave. He is no different than a servant. Now, if he's unlearned and he's untrained, he still is going to give himself over to somebody if he doesn't understand. If he's an heir and he has not taken over the glory or the powers which is rightfully his, but he hasn't grown up to that yet, he's going to be a slave. He's going to be a servant. What is he going to be a servant to? Or she going to be a servant to? A servant to who we yield ourselves to obey. Slave or servant, the same thing. We could yield ourselves to Yahweh and humble ourselves, or we could yield ourselves to the same spirits that Yahweh is talking about. That's in us too. And Yahweh says it will not go well for us. Well, don't take my word for it. Just look around us. Just look around us. Look at the experiences that the people are pretty much having outside. We're chasing the fun, and they're chasing all the things that are out there, but these are sort of the most miserable people. Because as soon as they can't have what they want and how they want it, they become some of the most miserable people on the face of the earth. And that's one thing I can guarantee you. None of us are going to have it the way that we want to have it all the days of our lives. We're not. And it's going to come down to how well we could handle things when we don't get it the way we want to. Because your Father's going to lay that in front of you because he's trying to drive out that lack of submissiveness that we have living in us. Because we can't come to him. We can't come to him. The greatest strength, guys, the greatest power is love. And love is going to do it for you. Love for yourself is not love to abuse yourself. Love for yourself, we have to realize that we're not our own in the first place. Okay, so the first thing is to love Yahweh and then love your brother as yourself. Well, if you love Yahweh, you have to understand that this is what you have, and this mind that you have, everything is not yours to do what you want to do with it. That's why he tells you to give your body as a living sacrifice. That means you serve his order. He says, your body is not your own. He says, don't you know that you are the temple of Yahweh? Well, whatever energy he puts in that temple, it should be used not to serve the self, because that's the darkness that's there, but to serve his order. Whatever strength he gives to you, don't serve the self. Because if you serve the self, you can't honor your father. You can't even honor your brother. Which you need to love your brother in order to love your father in heaven. There's no way to do it. Galatians 4 here, okay? So it tells you that as long as we remain ignorant, okay, we're no different than a slave. Although he is to be heir of all. But this is how he's brought up. But is under the subjection of teachers and office holders until the time appointed by the Father. So we also, when we were infants, unlearned, we were enslaved under the elements of the world. The elements of the world. You know the elements of the world? I don't know if you guys have heard of elementals. The elements of the earth, guys, are the spirit that causes you to move off in all these different directions. You don't have the strength to do certain things, or you haven't exercised the strength, or you're learning how to exercise the strength. These are the elements. The principalities and powers in high places. But when you grow up and you get the strength to handle things, you no longer do things as a child. When you are a child, you deal with childish things. But when you grow up, you put away childish things. This is of the spirit, however, that I'm talking about. Because when we're children, we chase after everything that's for ourselves. You know, some of you guys have been in some of these classes with the children, especially you get down to the 2-year-olds. And these guys, everything is theirs. Even what the other guy has is theirs. They want everything. So they're walking in the room, and another child is there with a toy, and this guy drops his toys and grabs the other child's toy. He wants to get it, and the child, bang, they go to war for it. A 2-year-old's class, the worst time for the teacher is when she's having them do their own thing. Free time. Because if she ain't engaging them, and they're all into her, what she's doing, and she kind of let them do their thing and don't train them, that's the worst time for them. Because they go to war because they want everything on demand. Now it's mine. You know, if I don't have it, it's not fun. I'm not having fun. That's where it is. And it's other people's properties that they're dealing with. Or properties that other people have that's not theirs. This is the same thing when we're young. When we're immature in spirit. We could look at ourselves as that 2-year-old walking through the school in the same manner, because that's what we do. Now, let's go over to Ephesians 5. Ephesians 5, and let's look at verse 21. Ephesians 5, and look at verse 21. It says, submitting yourselves to one another. Notice what it says, in the reverence of Yahweh. If you reverence Yahweh, what do? We obey Him. So what it's really saying is we submit ourselves to one another according to Yahweh. So parents don't play the can't beat them, join them thing with the children. But you have to teach the children this particular thing all your life. And when that child grows up, that child should hold that. And if that child does not hold that, you're not the boogeyman. You're not the boogeyman if that child doesn't hold that. No, you tell that child, this is what your father said. That child doesn't want to, that's up to that child. You've trained that child all your life. And that child has not listened to a word that you said. Now when it becomes critical, it shows itself. Where do you stand? Play the can't beat and join him? No, at this time you have to do what your father says. Let them know. This is what it is. And so they humble themselves in this. If they do, they will have won their lives. If they don't, well, you have to allow them to do their thing. This is what it comes down to. Now look here, in 22. Wives, submit yourselves to your husband just as to the Messiah. For the husband is the head of the wife, just as Messiah is the head of the called out ones, and he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, just as the called out ones are subject to Messiah, so wives are to be subject to their own husbands. Look at husbands. This is all the kingdom of heaven, guys. Husband, love your wives just as Messiah also loved the called out ones and gave. He got to give up. He got to give up his own passions and desires. And his passions and desires have to become that which is of Yahweh, so he does right with his wife. Or he does right but as a husband. But what if he's doing all those things and the wife don't submit herself to him? Does it work? No. What if the wife is going to work for him, It's going to be another problem for the wife. Well, it's the same thing with your children. If you're doing certain things and your children are not following instructions, is it going to go well for the children? It's going to go well for you, but you can't faint. The individual who is doing the righteous thing got to continue doing the right thing. Can't faint at this particular thing here. Now let's go over to 1 Timothy 3. Let's look at verse 2. Now if someone's going to run something here, let's look at verse 1. It says, "This is a true saying. If a man desires the office of an elder, or he's a leader," this is not just a man, this is a woman too. Of course, it's not just talking about elder, but an elder is someone who is going to take their place to direct individuals in the way of Yahweh. He desires a righteous work. Now, if we think of it in the mode of the physical person, then you leave it to a man. But if you think of it in the universal sense, then you have to leave it to anyone who Yahweh gives that ability to, and give them the opportunity to bring this forth in a spiritual manner. An elder then must be blameless in unity as husband and wife, sober and righteous of righteous behavior, given to hospitality, able to teach. At the same time, if he's able to teach or she's able to teach, she has to be able to learn too. So she got to become teachable, and he has to be teachable. Not given to wine nor striker, not greedy for filthy lucre, but patient, not quarrelsome, not covetous. One who rules his own house well, having his children in submission with reverence. Reverence to what? To the Father in heaven. And if they reverence the Father in heaven, they're going to reverence him too. Why? For if a man does not know how to rule his own house, how will he take care of the called out ones of Yahweh? Or this is the body of Messiah. Not a novice, in other words, not a child, not inexperienced. Or he may become puffed up with pride and fall into the same condemnation as the devil. This is what inexperience does, guys. It gives pomp. This is where we get this thing at. Moreover, he must have a righteous report among those who are outside, so that he will not fall into reproach and the trap of this ego that we call the devil. Not double-tongued, not given to much wine, not greedy for gain, keeping the great secret of the faith with a clear conscience. But let those also first be proved, then allow them to serve in the offices that they're going to be serving at, being found blameless. Now, this is how we give our sacrifices to Yahweh. You see what this is saying right here? This is telling us, if this man wants to serve in this office right here, what he has to do, he has to bring forth the right sacrifice. He has to show that he's not going to fail in this, and he has these things right here. Now, not everybody becomes an elder. Some people become elders, some people don't. But what you have is this. Someone becomes an elder, and in our age here, not everyone thinks it's unfair that one person is selected to be an elder, or that one is an elder, but another one is an elder. It's not unfair in that manner. We don't go, oh, that's not fair. I'm not an elder, I should be an elder. But what you have is this individual has been tested, or should be tested in a particular way, then given the opportunity to do this after they have proved themselves. Now you have the same thing when you come to your children. You have children who are older, children who are younger, but your children have to prove themselves also. Or the older child or children that you have, they may not get the same liberties, if you will, that a younger child would have, just because the younger child might have done those things that would qualify them for you to have trust in them. Whereas an older child may not have that. This is how the kingdom of heaven is working. And when the kingdom of heaven comes down to us, a younger child or an older child may say, well, that's unfair because he's younger or she's younger, and you let them do this, but you don't let me do this. It has nothing to do with that. It has all to do with the sacrifice that we're able to give by humbling ourselves, showing ourselves that we will live in a particular order. That's what it comes down to, that we will live in a particular order. And that order it comes down to how we love our brothers as ourselves. Let's go over to 2 Corinthians. Now Shaul has to have everybody who gave themselves as living sacrifices. Shaul is able to work with these individuals right here. In 2 Corinthians 11, 2 Corinthians 11, this is what it comes down to. Let's look at verse 2. Shaul says in verse 2, "For I am jealous for you with Yahweh's own jealousy," which is a zeal that he has. "For I betroth you to one husband." Now he's talking about all the people who are under his jurisdiction. He's betrothing them to one husband. But for them to deal with that one husband, they have to love that husband. Of course, that husband is Messiah. So to love that husband, they have to live as that husband. That's their sacrifice. That's our sacrifice too. There is no way for someone, a father or a governor or even Yeshua, to present someone that don't want to have themselves presented or is not ready for that presentation. When an elder has proved themselves, they're presented to be an elder. A child may be 25 years old and, okay, here, present this one to be an elder. Someone else may be 85 years old and they may not be there. And they'll be thinking, well, how that 25-year-old boy going to tell me what to do? Well, that 25-year-old boy has done what was given for them to do. We have the very same thing when it comes to us. There are things that we have to do. Things that all of us have to do. And when we do these things, then those who have the rule over us can present us. But if you look at this right here, Shaul says, "For I am jealous for you with Yahweh's jealousy, because I betroth you to one husband, that I may present you to Messiah." We already read the parents or those who have the rule over you, they have to look out for your soul. Why? Because they have to give account. They have to give account. So do your part, because they have to present you. Now they can't present you if they don't see that you're presentable, because guess what? They have to give their best. When everyone gives their best, then the one who is over whatever can make that presentation. A husband is the head of the household. Guess what that husband has to do? He has to present his family. He has to present his wife. That's what Yahweh has put before him. He's supposed to be betrothed to her, and he's supposed to betroth her to his head. Just like she holds the family together and she helps the family to follow that man, so also that man, the husband, he becomes like a bride in the same kind of manner, and his family is actually what he has to get to follow Messiah. So here goes Shaul presenting these here. Look what he said in verse 3. "But I fear that by any means, as the serpent subtly deceived Eve with his craftiness, so your minds may be corrupted, and led astray from the simplicity of life, really, that is in Messiah. For if he who comes preaches another Messiah, which we have not spoken of here, or if you accept a different spirit, which is what we do, we accept another spirit which you have not received, or another message which you have not accepted, or in other words, which the parents have not given you and you don't know about it, you might well put up with him. Today you have that all over the place, guys. All over the place. You teach your children. This is why these guys have this world in the manner that they have it. And that's why they have made school an institution that you let your children go in. Because that's how they take your children. That you cannot bring them up in the way of Yahweh. Because you tell them one thing, and you have a teacher over there that could tell them another thing. And the teacher has credentials to tell your child something else. And then your children meet all kind of things out there with friends, and they want to follow those things because they have passions and desires in them that they're not upholding according to what the parents have said. And so we have some who will take hold of these spirits that's coming there and run off and do these things. We have to think about where we are. We have to think about where we are, because there are things that has to be done. That has to be done here. Now, as we go along here, let's go with 1 Corinthians 15. Let's look at verse 21. It says, "For since death comes by man," and we all know it comes by Adam. That word "man" is Adam, Adam, whatever you know. So since death comes by Adam, man, by man, Adam, also comes the resurrection of the dead, because Adam actually initiated this. Yes, I know he wasn't deceived, but he initiated this. So Adam is responsible then for bringing everything back to where it's supposed to be. And that's why it says by man. For as in Adam all die. Now, you ever heard that it's appointed for man once to die? That's the die right there. It's appointed for man to do this one die right here. In the same way, all who are as Messiah, or in Messiah, that fell in Adam, will be made alive. And every man in his own order. Messiah, the first one recalled from the dead. Afterwards, those who are messiahs at his coming. Well, who is that? Those are the ones who fell with him. So Adam let everybody down that he had in here, under his jurisdiction as a priest or high priest, telling them what to do. They were subjecting themselves to him. He went down, they went down too. After that, everyone in their order. Well, he went down, they followed. So he go up, they follow up. In the same order. Him first, they come up. Well, when he came down into the earth, he wasn't the first man in the earth. He wasn't the first creature in this earth. They came down into this earth to actually cause certain ones here to be released from a slave mentality that was in here. They also fell to the same thing. So now they're leaving. They go back up. In he and his order, then those who fell with him. But there are those who came in here to actually recover. They have to come in their order too. So he goes, then those who fell, and then after that, those down there he goes and he helps those who he was with. He helps them to come up, and then when they come up, they help all the other ones that they went down there to help in the first place. They help them also. So this is the order that he's talking about here. But everyone has to present themselves as a sacrifice. Okay, so here goes. And every man in his order, Messiah, the first one recalled from the dead. Afterwards, and he's sending that spirit in here. Those who are Messiahs at his coming. At his coming, he's getting those who are for him. How do you know if you're for him? This is how they will know that you are my disciples. By the love that you show for your fellow man. That's what he's saying. This is how you're going to know. So Messiah first, and then those who are doing what? Those who are able to love their brothers as themselves. Because when they are resurrected from this here, they're redeemed from among men, guess what they have to do? They have to help the rest of them that was stuck in here in the first place. Because when they came down here, they fell from the mission. They have to return to the mission. There's no way for them to return to the mission without loving their brothers as themselves. This is something we got to do. This is a sacrifice. We have to put our minds to that, and we have to get that love inside of us and remove the darkness that's in there. Now, we went through here and we read, tell us what will we see at the end of the age and the sign of your coming. We read that. Well, now we see those signs. Well, we know Messiah is close. Well, who is Messiah going to redeem? We're reading it here right now. He in his order, then those who are his. His. How are we his? This is how you will know that they will know that you are my disciples, by the love that you show. We have to be harmless. We have to do no harm. And harm just don't come by clubbing somebody upside the head. No, guys, if you hate someone, it's harm. Our scripture says, he who hates his brother in his heart is a murderer. And don't think that any murderer has any place in the kingdom. So hatred can't go nowhere. If we love our brother, we're going to love him as ourselves. If we don't like to lose anything, we don't want to take anything either. We don't want to take anything from our brother. Because we don't like that. And if we're going to be redeemed with Messiah, we're going to learn to help our brothers. Imagine you becoming a government official and you're stealing stuff from folks. Like these guys are doing today. They're robbing the people blind, the people don't know. Imagine you becoming a government official and you're supposed to be taking care of your brother and leading him to safety and you hate him. This is the kingdom that's about to rise. Do you think if we have those things living in us that's going to be presented to our brother, to Messiah? Which one of you are going to come knowing that this one is full of hatred and is going to take that one and present it? Here comes Yahshua. Okay, I'm presenting this one. This is my best. Which one are you going to do it? Which one of you is going to know that this one right here has broken every single law and is still doing it and want to do it and say, okay, this is my presentation. I'm presenting this. Which one of you would present that? Would that be your best? Remember, Cain brought forth the fruit of the ground. Abel, along with the fruit of the ground, brought forth the lamb. The burnt offering. That means the fruit of the ground that he had was going to submit to what Yahweh was saying. But the one that Cain brought wasn't in that place. And Yahweh accepted what Abel brought. Because Abel's would have been submissive to the order of Yahweh. But Cain's would not be. So Cain's wasn't honored. But Yahweh honored Abel's. Now instead of Cain saying, man, I got to do better, Cain then hated his brother for what he didn't do. This is the mentality, this is the Cain mentality that has come down to us today. And Cain went and murdered that which did it right. And so Cain tried to spread all through this place right here that Yahweh had to bring forth another child that was righteous from Adam and Eve. But Cain is spreading this behavior. Let me tell you a story. We had an employee up until just last week. This employee walked off the job, had a class, left the class, children in there, left, went home. The director sees this, and so the director now calls me and, okay, what should I do? You know, I don't really want this person back. I said, okay, well, they're the ones who did this, you know, so they pretty much quit. That's what they did. Well, the person texted the director and said, okay, I'm coming tomorrow. The director calls me. Do I gotta take this person back? No, if you don't want to bring them back, just let them know what's going on. So the director pretty much said, okay, I have made other arrangements for your class. So didn't honor this person, what this person did, and said, no, you can't come back here. We're going to do something else with that. Kind of the Cain Yahweh thing. Instead of this person looking at themselves and said, man, I did something wrong, and repenting of what they did, this person goes to turn the director in by calling the bosses and telling the bosses, well, isn't it true that the director in at so and so place cannot fire anybody? Well, I just want you to know that they just fired me, and they're not supposed to fire anybody. So you can walk out of class anytime you want to and come back and do whatever you want to do. This is what you want to do? This is the Cain mentality that has come down, guys. We abuse our brother, which your brother is another human being, and you don't look at yourself, but we look at the state that we have fallen into, and we are not contrite about what we have done. There's not love there. That's only looking out for myself. But when Yahweh put you in a place, he's trying to get your attention. It's time for that person to change their ways. Cain didn't do that. And you have the same Cain mentality going around. We want to hold on to who we are, regardless of the scriptures telling us that we should not be conformed to that, but be transformed by the renewing of the mind. We have to renew ourselves. We can't let these spirits stay in there and dictate our lives. There are things that are about to happen here. So you have Shaul that was turning over certain people to Messiah. Now here you go Messiah in verse 24. Then the end, when he will have handed over the kingdom of Yahweh to our father. So Shaul is handing over things to Messiah for everyone to be betrothed to one husband. And then Messiah here in 24 he says, and then the end, when he will have handed over the kingdom to Yahweh to our father. Notice what he does. Notice who he has given over to him. When he will have destroyed every rule and every other authority and power, for he must reign until he has put all enemies under his feet. Now, when we look at this, we may say, oh man, he got to rule and put everybody down. Well, guys, all this is really telling you is all that an enemy is going to come down to be is that which resists Yahweh. So my enemy is inside of me. But the enemy inside of me wants me to think that you guys outside or this guy down there that stole my lawnmower, that he's my enemy. But my enemy, they're the passions and desires that I have and what I want to give myself to that is not of the Father. That is my enemy. And that is your enemy. And as long as we want to yield ourselves to those voices or those passions and desires, and when we see the law of Yahweh, we don't want to change, we're going to always hold that enemy. And that enemy is going to rule over us. And as that enemy is ruling over us, we have given ourselves over to become slaves or servants to that thing that we're following the instructions of. So, we got to think about what we're doing here. Because there's something that's real. We have to look at ourselves. We have to see what's living there. And we have to willfully do something about it. Now, not everybody may want to do something about it, and that's fine. But if you think that you want to do something about it, you have to give the effort. And that's all of us, everyone. But Yahweh is going to allow impatience to come up so he could direct you with his laws to put it down in you, to control it. You have a cat out here, a stray cat, you give it food one day and it'll be back every day because it wants food. Well, you have these things living in you. And as everything is going well, it seems fine, but then when some resistance comes, then all of a sudden it raises its head. Well, your Father has allowed the resistance to come. He allowed the resistance to come so you may find that this thing is still there. Because now this thing got you snarling. And your mouth is going up and your fangs are coming up and you turn into wolves like it's full moon. We see this. Well, Yahweh's allowing you to see this in you. And me to see this in me. And he sets the conditions aright that these things come up. But we have to go and we have to meditate upon what Yahweh wants in the place of that. Ask your Father for the things that you need to drive those things out of you. And so that you may learn to love him. And when you learn to love him, you also learn to love your brother. Because your brother, when you look at your brother, you're looking at him. That's how you got to see it. You're looking at your brother, you're looking at him. It's a universal body. And it's no different than you doing something for that sore toe you have over here. You want to fix it. Well, it's damaged. When it's on your body, you want to fix it. Well, when you see someone who has really, really bad issues, then you got to deal with it in the same kind of manner. Are you going to treat that toe the same way you treat every other part of your body? No. You're going to take precautions around it. You're not going to do just anything. Well, the same person who is a thief or a robber, whatever the case is, you're not just going to be doing whatever you want to do with them either. But the things that you need to do that would promote healing to those individuals, you bring that opportunity to it. That's the sore toe. That's what your Father has. Don't hate them because they have done something. Just get the hatred out of us. And the dislike. And the impatience. Just remove those things. Because everyone has their problems. Their issues. That your Father brings forth for them to overcome. And what more, he brings you to see it so you could assist someone to overcome. Because he may want to make you a Malak, or make you one that is redeemed from here. And if he wants you to be redeemed from here, guess what you have to do in here? You have to lead your brother to safety. You have to play Messiah in here. And with that, I'll close.